All right. Welcome to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, episode 179. We're your on-demand audio source for all things waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. Check us out, hpoutdoors.com. You can find our podcast on all the quality podcast directories out there, iTunes, Stitcher, Facebook, or Spotify. Wherever you find your podcast content, you can find our show. You can head over to social media, find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you are into Facebook groups, you can head over to ours and chat with a bunch of like-minded hunters. And my co-host, Dan Harushka. Dan, what's up, man?
And I can see that you have some nice flow going, and I just couldn't handle the COVID hair any longer, so I had to self-mutilate my hair, and is what it is, but good to see you.
No cut till a cure, bro. Anyway, we're excited to be live in the group this week, and we are excited to be joined by a guest who I'm going to bring on here right now, Dan. So stand by. We're excited to be joined by Josh Parvin of Cornerstone Gundog Academy. Josh, what's up, man?
How's it going? Excited to be on here. Appreciate you guys for bringing me on.
Yeah, man, we're excited to have you. And we're looking forward to chatting hunting dogs. And, you know, anytime we talk dog training, it's one of the most popular topics that we get into. You know, those episodes always get tons of views and tons of likes and questions and stuff like that. So we're pumped to be able to have you in the group with us this evening and kind of take questions while we talk, because no matter what, every time we do a dog training episode, we always get the, hey, you know, can you ask this? You know, I would have wished you would ask this, or whatever it was. So we started doing this kind of format so that, like, if we're missing that, you know, something's going on, we got it covered. So, you know, we've had Barton on the show half dozen times or so, maybe more over the years. It's the first time having you on the program. So maybe we can start off by just letting you talk a little bit about your background, sort of how you got into gun dog training, all that kind of stuff, and just sort of give us a little baseline of kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'd love to share that. So really my story, I feel like my story is similar to a lot of people's. You get into gun dogs because you love hunting. Not everybody does, but a lot of people do. That's what attracts us to it. But if you go way back, I've always loved outdoors. I've always been involved with hunting. My dad got me involved at an early age. Probably I was 4 or 5 on my first deer hunt. Couldn't even look over the shooting house window, but he set me up in his lap. I could look out. I would see the deer out in the field, and I thought that was the coolest thing. And then so we hunted deer for a long time. But as I grew older and started hunting on my own, that kind of the fun wasn't quite there as much. Of course, we love deer hunting, whitetail hunting, but it's not the same when you're not, you know, making those connections. So that's when we started branching out and trying different huntings, such as waterfowl. We had a lot of people at our church telling us about waterfowl hunting, and they said, you know, you've got to try it. And we're thinking, you know, that's not going to be, you know, as a deer hunter, we're thinking, no, that's not going to be that good. We're going to be freezing. But we went out there on our first waterfowl hunt, and I wasn't cold at all. In fact, never looked back after that. That's kind of what transitioned us into the gun dogs, because when we were out there on our first hunt, there was this one really incredible dog in that blind. And we were terrible shots. It was all new hunters out there, so we were only barely hitting them. And that dog did, I can't tell you how many 400 or 500 yard retrieves that dog did that day. But it was impressive. So that kind of set a spark inside that led us down that path. And that's kind of a little bit of my background. But it started with the roots of deer hunting, but it led straight to waterfowl hunting.
So where are you located at now?
I am just in Gardendale, Alabama. So I've always been in the Birmingham, Alabama area, but currently I live right in Gardendale, Alabama.
So fairly warm. And Josh, if you don't mind, I'm going to pull one of Manini's questions out, and we'll just get right into it, man. You know, right
Let's
here.
do it.
You know how, and we'll throw it up there. How do you beat the heat? It's already hot. Yeah. It's already hot as can be here in Arizona, so any outside stuff is hard to do unless it's under the stars due to the work schedule. So how are you, you know, and it's really, what is it, May here, so it's not, I mean, I
It's
guess in
hot.
Arizona, it's super hot. It's hot. It's hot where you're at. So,
It's
how do you
hot.
go about it and keep the dog safe?
Yeah, so it's the heat. That's a tough thing. It's tough for us. It's tough for the dog. It really comes down to just trying to train at times that you can manage the heat. I wouldn't be training out in the middle of the day here. I don't do that. It's just going to be too hot. Anytime it gets above 80, especially with the humidity here in Alabama, it'll suck it out of you. And the dogs, they're done after a few retrieves. So I either get up really early or really late, or let's say if you're in that situation and let's say your work schedule is saying, hey, I can only train, in the early afternoon. Well, in that case, you may just want to limit your training and do a few retrieves and then let your dog rest. Basically work on place work or extended place, or kind of like you do when you're sitting there hunting. I mean, the birds aren't always coming in, so you can never train enough on just sitting down, hanging out with your dog, and then let them rest, let them get their energy back up, make sure it's not too hot, then give them a couple more retrieves, and then keep them cool. Try to work in the shade if you can, but the heat is tough as something that I do not look forward to when it comes to training dogs. And if you work with it, if you're patient, you can definitely, make the most of it at least.
Let me ask a question now that I'm thinking about this, because it's hot here. It's May, right? Like, it's warming up in a lot of places in the country, and I live in Virginia, and when September starts, we start hunting early geese, and it's hot. I mean, it's hot during the day. Most people think about protecting their dog from cold when when they're hunting. Could they? Is heat hunting in September like that a concern, or is there enough downtime between flights and stuff where it's not as big of a deal?
That all depends on how many birds are coming in. But let's say you get covered up. If you're covered up, you might want to let your dog rest. It just depends. For me, I'm going to be reading my dog's body language. I'm going to be paying attention to that and kind of seeing where they stand on everything. And if they're just their tongue's hanging out, they're laying down like they're all tired, then I'll probably will let them rest and we'll go out and pick the bird. So it really comes down to just reading your dog's body language. But if a lot of dogs actually die of heat stroke or get severely injured by it, so you have to be careful. For me, it's just a matter of I look at them, I get a feel for, hey, if this dog, if I feel like it can do it, I'll do it. And some dogs, you have to be careful. They have so much drive, so much desire that they'll go and they'll just keep going. So you have to really pay attention to how your dog's doing it. If they get a little too hot, it could be dangerous. So never, always err on the safe side for sure.
I'm going back to a conversation we had with Barton, and he was saying even though you assume that putting them in be steering clear of right now, or is it kind of wait till the water gets to a certain degree?
I don't. It's for me. It's not a science. I'm sure there's, a vet would be able to answer that better. But as far as it's again, it boils down to reading the dog, and how hot it is. I mean, if the water's hot, like in Alabama, once we get to July, August, if you get in the water, sometimes it feels just as warm in the water. So that's really what he's saying there. You've got to be careful when it comes to that. But no matter whether you're working in water or on land, when it comes to heat, it really it all boils down to your dog. And, any times, like if you look at their tongues and it starts getting extra, it starts to turn a slightly different color than what it normally is, to me, that's telling me, hey, that dog's getting extra hot. I've got to be careful with it. So when it comes to the water, I'm not afraid to necessarily put them in the water. It's just all my sessions are going to be short just to keep them safe. And so get out there, do some water retrieves, do some land retrieves, but just watch your dog. And if you think it's getting too hot, that's a good chance to put it back up. But definitely don't play with the heat either.
And let me compound on the water as far as drinking is concerned. When you're out training, do you have any water with you, or are you letting them take any breaks? And the reason, yay or nay?
Really good question. I'm very cautious of that. A lot of times, I've never experienced this, but I've heard of it. a lot of people, they work their dog real hard and they let it go get water, and sometimes they're fine. But I've heard of a lot of, that's a possibility, and I don't know about this for sure, but I've heard of it happening where it turns their stomach, and it can be dangerous. So for me, I actually don't have a lot of water out there. I might just get a water bottle and give them a couple of palmfuls, not a lot, just a little. And then what I do is I come back home, I let my dogs rest, I let them lay down for about an hour, then I get them out, then I give them some water. So I'm always very cautious if I'm working them, especially doing lots of retrieves, working them hard. I never feed them or water them right after. I always give them a little bit of time to rest, about an hour, somewhere in there.
Cool. I'm gonna jump to a question. We've got several come in here, so I'll pull one in. It's a little bit longer, so I'll try to read through this in case it doesn't hit the screen here. But basically, it says if you have a lab that's a year old and gets some energy and spark from the clicker and treat, and he does retrieves but doesn't seem to learn nearly as quickly with retrieves as the reward, what would you do?
So basically, looks like it's a patience thing. So whenever you transition to new skills, and it's a good question, it actually kind of applies to a lot of areas of your training, no matter what, whether it's the retrieve, but specifically in this question and in other areas, if you try something new with your dog and they're not necessarily responding as good to something that they have before, that's okay. The dog's probably just processing and just trying to figure out, hey, what's going on here? This is new, because up until this point, maybe you've gotten to a groove with your dog. It's loving the quick clicker and treat. It's doing really good. It's got a good feel for it. But then you bring out retrieves. Maybe you haven't been retrieving yet, and all of a sudden the dog's thinking, okay, this is different, and it's trying to figure everything out. That's a good chance just for you as a handler to be patient, and as you're training your dog, be patient and realize, okay, I've just introduced my dog to something new. So it's going to obviously take some time to work through it with them, because they have to figure out what's required of them. And that's a huge thing as far as, that specific topic, but you could basically blanket that over all of dog training. Anytime you introduce something new, definitely be patient with your dog. But as far as the retrieve, go ahead.
I was actually going to ask that real quick. I mean, dog training to me would be one of the things where requires an incredible amount of patience. And I'm curious what you think about this. Like, with social media and stuff today, you see just dogs that are just hard charging, stopping on the, doing everything perfectly. And then you get guy who's like weekend dude who just training when he's got some time, and, they're struggling to get to that point. And I could see frustration boiling in really quickly. And it almost feels like, if you remember back in the day when like monster buck videos were like the jam, right? Everybody thought they were going to roll out on the ground and shoot a 180 because they did it 30 times on the video, right? And that's just not reality. So I'm curious, like, how often does that come up where people are like, man, I'm really struggling with all of this stuff, and you don't necessarily have the magic bullet. It's like, you just got to be patient and you got to continue to work through it.
It's all the time. And honestly, I would say, at least for me, I know a lot of other professionals I've talked to, even for professionals, I mean, that happens. You've done it a lot, but you keep working with a new dog, and then all of a sudden it's just not happening as quick, and it can be easy to get frustrated, but frustration is going to slow your progress even more. So it's it really, you might be getting frustrated because it's not going as quick as you would like it, but that's actually going to slow your progress down even more. But 100%, just the amount of work and the amount of repetition it takes to get your dog to be successful in all arenas is just unimaginable. It's way more than you would think. So you could be knocking something out with your dog. You could be doing all obedience. You could be into retrieves. You could even be into whistle work and all kinds of more advanced skills. And then you go and you move to new training locations, and it's all of a sudden your dog is reverted back to like 3 months before, when it was just getting into taking lines. And that is something that boils down to just reps and basically going back to the fundamentals. All training is going to boil back down to the fundamentals. If you focus on them, then you're good to go. But nonetheless, frustration still comes in, I would say, for me. I think everyone can relate to that. And for me, I always try to take my own advice. I don't always take my own advice, but anytime I get frustrated, I try to step back from the situation and figure out, hey, what is going on? Is the dog just doing this because it's just choosing to be disobedient, or is it not sure? Is there a new smell out there? Maybe a deer walked by before we came out. And you never know. There's so many different variables that could go into it. So I try to be as least frustrated as possible. But for everybody, I would say for professionals or for the person that's doing their first dog, guarantee it, you're going to feel like your dog should be moving a lot faster than it is.
I have a question. We talk about us having patience, but when, and I don't know when, how old Nicholas's dog is, but when do you get away from the clicker and then you really know that the retrieve is the reward?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And as far as I'll answer that, but also think while we're talking about the clicker, let's talk a little bit about that, because I know some might not really know what the clicker is or might not be familiar with it. So I think that would be a good thing to mention next. But really kind of getting away from it, I like to really transition away from the clicker when I've really laid down the foundation very well. So I've already done basic obedience, I've done intermediate and advanced obedience, and I've started the process of teaching my dog how to retrieve, because it's a blended process. So you're not going to quit cold turkey. You're not just going to say, okay, I'm done using the clicker and treat, one day. It's going to be a slow process and what's actually called variable reinforcement. But to make it very simple, basically, instead of clicking and treating a lot and consistently, you're actually just starting to fade that out less and less. So essentially, your dog doesn't know when they're going to get rewarded. So that's what you kind of do leading up to when you start rolling into the retrieves and teaching your dog how to retrieve. Then you start teaching your dog how to retrieve, and then obviously as you're going through that process, you start trading the reward for the actual retrieve itself. And eventually you can kind of bleed that out. I always do keep the clicker in my back pocket, though. You never know when you're going to need it. If you ever need to sharpen up your dog's obedience, you can absolutely do that or work through a problem area. But it really is it's a slow process that kind of just blends together. So there's no like defined moment that you're done with the clicker and treat. It's, will your dog perform without the clicker and treats? And again, the way you get to that is through variable reinforcing, or reinforcing every other time, or every 5 times out of 10, or every 2 times out of 10, until eventually you don't have to do it anymore. And then again, you transition into the retrieve, and once you get to the retrieves and it clicks, and most dogs, once you get to the retrieves, are pretty excited about it. So they're generally even more interested in retrieving than they are even so than the treats.
Wow. So this, a lot of questions I'm sure that you get are like guys that either just bought a puppy or they're preparing to buy a puppy, and they're like trying to figure out what they're going to do and how their training approach is going to be and all that good stuff. But guy from the group, Art, here has a good question that I think is valid, because his question actually deals with the dog that's not a puppy, and it's a little bit older. And I think a lot of guys, like me, for example, I didn't start hunting until a little bit later in life, and I already had a dog, and I was like, well, he's probably too old to really like get into it at this point, and he's too prone to ear infections anyway, so I let him stay at home. But I mean, a lot of guys probably want to try to sharpen up or see if they can get their older dog to a level where they can enjoy some time in the field. So we'll bring Art's question in here and see what you think about this. Basically, Art says his dog's 3 and retrieves, but he has no direction unless he throws a rock or he actually sees the bird. And he's wondering if he can correct that with him being, at that age. And is that something that they can overcome?
Excellent question. And actually, we get a lot of people that come to us in that exact same situation. So some come with puppies, some come with 2 or 3-year-old dogs. You hear the saying, hey, dogs, can be too old to learn new tricks. Well, that's not necessarily the case. You can teach an old dog new tricks if you want to. And I wouldn't consider a 3-year-old dog old. It's still pretty young. Yeah. It still has a lot to learn. And you can definitely work with it. I will say, as you get to that 1 year plus and you get into the 2 to 3 year age range, even 4 years old, what you're going to have to work with is maybe some habits that are already ingrained. We talked about repetition a minute ago and how much it takes, an unbelievable amount. Well, every single day you have your dog, it's repeating things. And there's some things that you might not be paying attention to. Maybe you just got into hunting and, up until this point, throwing rocks in a direction was good with you. but you really started looking into dogs and you think, hey, I would like my dog to actually be able to take hand signals. Well, if you've been throwing rocks for 2 years straight, you've got a lot of repetition, a lot of ingrained habits that you'll have to work through with that specific dog. So just with that in mind, it may take a little longer to get your dog to the level that you want it to, especially handling. But even with a 3-year-old dog, I mean, as long as you've got the fundamental base down, you can start teaching it to take hand signals if you want. There's no problem with that. Just realize, again, with a little bit of an older dog, it may take a little longer, mainly just because it's got other things that you'll have to train through, some things that it's more comfortable with or that it's just used to doing. So definitely with a little bit of an older dog, you could absolutely work with it. It just may take a little extra work than starting with a puppy that's brand new and basically a brand new piece of clay ready to be molded however you want it to be.
So with your response, I'm just thinking, would it be easier for him to have someone helping him and like actually stand where a location is and, you know, line him up properly? Is that like a step that he should take?
I would always go back to the basics. So I would make sure, you know, even with that dog, a lot of people, and I'm saying this because I talk to people every single day that come with similar situations. And I would say, make sure you've covered your obedience first. Make sure you've covered all that. Because a lot of times that's not actually where it needs to be. But once you've got that, let's say you want to start teaching those hand signals. I would go, I wouldn't have someone sitting out there. I would teach the hand signals individually. So you're just going to basically put a bumper out to its right or put a bumper out to its left or a bumper back behind it. You're going to want to utilize a fence for this because if you think about it, you need your dog to be able to run up against something to pull your dog to where the bumper is, and then you can start teaching your dog the hand signals individually. Then what you would do is you would start combining those hand signals together, and then eventually you could start branching out from there and teaching your dog to do hand signals when it's not basically on a blind type retrieve, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think there's some times you're hunting in some timber and you don't have rocks. It'd be hard to start breaking some limbs off and throwing them out in the water. But
well, I've seen people throwing rocks and smack their hand on a screw on the top of the blind, and then there's blood everywhere. So it's not that fun if that happens. And like you said too, the distance is going to eventually become an issue. Even if you have a slingshot, some of those birds, they go too far. So you need to be able to have it under that tight control.
Yeah. So there's another question in the group that I do want to get to because I think it's a good one and it comes up a lot. But before we do that, I want to talk just briefly here about Cornerstone Gundog Academy and let people know like the logo on your hat with the 52 and stuff. One of the biggest questions that I see in our group, and I see it if not once a week, it may be more frequently than that, is people want to know about Cornerstone. You hear is it worth it? Like, is it good? Like, can I use it? Right. I mean, like, these are all questions because as we talked about, someone's buying a puppy and a puppy is a significant financial investment. And, if they want to put that dog on the best path, for training and they're considering Cornerstone, they've got questions, right? And let's assume that person doesn't have an extensive background or maybe any background in gun dog training. That is, and as far as I understand it, that is really one of the biggest benefits of Cornerstone is it will teach you that sort of crawl, walk, run sort of approach so that you can do it yourself. But as someone who knows the program as well as anybody, just tell us a little bit about, when a guy's exploring his options on gun dog training, what is it that Cornerstone brings to the table that's, going to put them off in the right path?
Yeah. So I think that's a really great question. And it's hard to begin on that one. I mean, first of all, just beyond just the actual program itself, I mean, we care a lot about the people that come to the table, and for good reason. It comes down to your story specifically, whoever you are, that wherever you're at. I mean, we understand, that feeling, especially for the person that's coming, it's even brand new to hunting and dogs, let alone, it can feel very overwhelming. There is zero question about that. Even now, if you've been in hunting forever, you've seen great dogs, you hear all the stories about how someone got their dog to where it is. It can feel like, I don't know if that's even possible. For me, somebody that's brand new at it, anybody in that situation. And, for us, again, it boils back down to the individual and their journey. And we're all about helping someone have that dog, because if you get beyond where you're at, let's say maybe you're sitting there in a situation where, you're thinking about it, but you're not sure if you should attempt to do this, because like you said, Josh, it is an investment. So you want to make sure you get the most out of your investment. Let's just say you're sitting there thinking, can I do this? Is this something worth attempting? And I would think, if I were you, I would think about the end goal. Think about how good it's going to be, because we know what it's like to have trained your own dog. We know what it's like to have seen tons of people use our program and train their own dog and accomplish that. And it's a huge accomplishment to train your own dog and get it to a level to when you go out there and you're hunting, it's a joy to be with, and you get invited back to the blind because, hey, everybody liked hunting with your dog. It went out and got the birds. And I would say just the initial feelings of, can I do this? Is it worth it? Am I going to be able to accomplish this? I would say, put all that out of your mind and think about, hey, where am I going? What is it going to be like when I get there? So just take it off the table. Can I do it? And just say, I can do this, and get after it. And that's kind of where our program comes in, because we want to give you the framework to help you be able to do it. We want to give you the vehicle that you can, turn the key on and drive it. Now, it's not you can't just buy the program and have a trained dog. You do have to drive the vehicle. You do have to put in the work to get there, because it is a lot of work. That's why they pay people so good to train dogs, and that's why people become great at it, because it takes a lot of work, and not everybody wants to do that. But for the individual that wants to have that dog and that wants to put in the work and have that experience that no one can take from you, it's worth every single bit of it. But as far as the logo on the hat, the 52 plus, that is that's kind of our next direction that we've been rolling with Cornerstone. Now, obviously, we're keeping our original program because it's incredible. Lots of great videos there, lots of great information. Someone can take that program, the Complete Gundog Academy, and they can work through it from start to finish and have an incredible gun dog that they can hunt with and be very happy with. But we've also had some reach out that just want even more. The questions we asked ourselves were, we have our Facebook group, we talk to members a lot, and some just want even more. And we thought, hey, what would it be like if we could just be right there with you along the way? Because it's no lie, it's no secret that you're gonna face challenges as you work with your dog. We talked about frustration earlier, and sometimes it boils down to your dog's just not quite there yet. It just needs a little more reps. But sometimes it boils down to a specific issue that if you were to try a different angle, you could easily get through it and make great advancement and great progress. So for the 52 plus, for those that want the most detail, that's kind of where it's come from. And there is no detail that is left out when it comes to 52 plus. I mean, we literally are filming our journey of training a dog through the entire Complete Gundog Academy. We show you the mess ups all, every mistake, everything that goes right, everything that goes wrong, and we just show you the whole journey.
Yeah, it was really cool to see, the Cornerstone form and everyone to start going through it, and then you see the questions and you guys answer, and then finally the 52 plus came, and that was so detailed in every way, and that was with Violet, right?
That's correct. Yeah,
that's your dog.
Tried to follow my chair right there. If anybody saw that.
Did you just break your chair?
Well, I'm sitting on a white lawn chair, like a legit just redneck lawn chair. Gets caught up in the carpet a little bit when I'm trying to slide away from the computer. So don't worry about that.
For people just listening, he literally just fell off the screen and came back real quick. But that was nice.
So what were we talking about again? I forget.
52 plus. One thing that I enjoyed seeing too, with Cornerstone, you had a lot of first-time trainers come on, and you did spotlights on them, and they actually told their story. And so it just goes back to what you're saying. If you are dedicated to it, and even going back to Maureen Hitchens, right? So she's Aaron's mom. Yeah, name dropping, Josh. I'm sorry, but that was the first dog she ever trained, right? And that dog's doing awesome. So yeah. I'm sure a little help from Aaron along the way, but it's just cool, and it really is something that's easy to follow. And then you guys are always at the other end of the line when there are questions. So kudos to you guys on all of that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I wanted to jump into another one of these questions with you because, again, my dog, like I said, my dog is a 90-pound golden retriever that just loves nothing more than getting ear infections and chewing on his paws. So he's not a hunting dog. But so my level of education on retriever training is quite low. But one of the things I see come up a lot, and it seems like it's a topic that has a lot of different opinions to it, is force fetching. And Nick here's got another question that's a good one, I think. And he asks, do you think is force fetching or hold conditioning a must for the weekend warrior type hunter?
Well, either way you're going to go 100%. I mean, if you're going to, even for a weekend warrior, if you're getting after it, if you're training a dog and you're investing any amount of time, you need to be putting as much in as you can. And you don't want to miss or skimp on that, because if your dog will not hold, if your dog will not bring the bird back, or if your dog picks it up and then drops it and has to pick it up again and drop it, you're missing out on birds. And, for those that are more interested in hunting and just want to have the dog there with you just to help with the experience, you're missing out on birds, because if your dog's out there flopping around the decoys trying to get the bird but can't get it back, I've seen it happen. And birds are coming in. Everybody's thinking this dog needs to get in the blind right now because they're coming in and we need to be ready for them. And sometimes you miss them. So I would say absolutely you need to be teaching your dog how to retrieve the hand properly, 100%, whatever method you're going at. It doesn't matter what method you're doing. You just need to make sure that you cover it and make sure that your dog comes on back and brings that bird back and doesn't drop it.
Being the really bad trainer that I am, I have a lot of stories like that with Kimber.
All the stories.
Kimber bringing wood ducks back. Three at the one story she brought it back 3 different times and dropped it, and the thing got right back in the water and took off. She's just looking at me like, "Come on!" I'm like, "Well, you're the one that dropped it. What do you want? What do you want me to do?" But I had a question for you. My father-in-law, working with Boo, who is a Southern Oak Kennels dog. I said, we're talking to Josh. He's like, I really like watching Josh on Cornerstone. So props to you there. But she said when Boo's 100 yards out and she's hunting for the dummy, she will not stop to a whistle. And whenever if she can't find it and finally kind of gives up, then she will stop and turn around and look and whatnot. So what is he doing wrong, or what does he need to work on to make sure she's stopping when that whistle hits?
Very good question. There's a couple of questions I'd have, but we probably can't get the answer right away. So I'll just give you a couple of scenarios. My first question would be, will your dog stop at 50 yards? Or 60 yards or 70 yards. So it's a big thing. So the 100-yard mark, maybe the dog's not stopping there. Maybe it does perfect at 50 yards, but you branched out to the 100 yards and it can't handle it. And that's because the dog needs to be more slowly worked out to that distance. For example, if your dog can crush it at 50, don't jump to 100. Jump to 55 yards or to 60 yards. It's kind of a very slow progression to get your dog to where they stop. And if your dog's not stopping on the whistle, don't keep blowing it, because it's not at that 100-yard mark. It's not going to do anything good to keep blowing that whistle. So, if maybe the dog doesn't stop every single time, maybe the dog stops a couple of times out at 100 yards, but this time it didn't. So it's kind of sporadic. It's all going to boil back down in this specific situation to the fundamentals and making sure that everything is perfectly covered. Make sure that you've worked your way out to that, because if you didn't do enough reps at 70 yards and didn't drill it in, you should get to the point to where if you blow the whistle, you have zero question if your dog is going to stop at whatever distance it is. And if you can't make it to 100, that's okay. Go to 20 yards, start at 20, and then work your way out to that 100. I mean, it is a lot of work, but I'll tell you this, once you put that work in and once you've conditioned your dog into it, it's done. Your dog has it, and it's going to remember it. If you do enough reps, your dog will not forget it. So I would say go back to the basics. Go back to individual whistle stop when you're not actually specifically retrieving, but also transition into just some shorter retrieves and get success. if you took away anything, whether you're using our program, whether you're using another program, if you set your dog up for success and you get it wins, that's going to be the best bet. That is always going to help you have the best dog possible. Even if you feel like your dog should be further along, if you feel like that dog should, hey, my dog should be doing that 100-yard whistle stop, no doubt. Even if you feel like that, it doesn't matter. You need to set it up. If it's not winning, you're taking steps back. So make sure that you're making those wins. Even if it's a small victory, that's okay. Training a dog is going to boil down to lots of small victories added up together to the whole grand finale of having that champion gun dog that you've worked so hard for.
There you go. So Thad, when you're listening to this, reel it in, my friend. Reel it in.
So I sort of have a question about setting your dog up for success because, I think that rings true in a lot of things in life. For example, if I play golf once every 2 weeks or once a month, I should have no expectation of going out there and shooting par. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to be terrible, or I'm going to be inconsistent at least. And so I assume that there needs to be some level of regularity and sort of, rhythm to the training program to allow your dog to sort of understand, okay, it's time to work. Like these are, our sessions, how that all goes. What realistically can a guy do? What can he get away with? And it probably is a little bit dependent on the dog, but, guys working full time or it's hot and you're limited, summer, you got vacation, whatever, you got life going on. If a guy's training once a week, should he have a expectation of a success or does it need to be more frequent than that? Like what's kind of a general rule of thumb if there is one?
Really, really good question. If you're training once a week, and for some people that's all they have, you got to make the most of it. So I'm all for making the most of what you do have 100%, because if you don't have 4 days, you only have one. You've only got one option, and so you better make the most of that one day. And maybe you train a lot in that one day. It is better to train more days per week. I would say a good average is 3 to 4 days per week if you have it, and it doesn't have to be 1 hour, 2 hour sessions. Anything over an hour, the dog's already going to be, making some mistakes, because that's a long time to pay attention. Even for us as individuals, that's a long time to pay attention. So I would say, as far as setting your dog up for success, if you're on that 1 day a week training regimen, don't go out there and just, for me, I like to get out and attack stuff. I like to just go out and do. And sometimes with that mentality, sometimes I think I can do more than I can actually do in a certain period of time. So, with that in mind, don't bite off more than you can chew. Just get out there. And I would say this, every session's different. So if you're out there and you're working with your dog, you've got that 1 day a week and you've got big plans and everything's going well, and then you hit one part of that plan that you have, and then things just start going off the tracks, don't be upset because that one small piece fell apart. Move to something that you're getting success at and be content with what you did have, and then reevaluate when it's all over and figure out, okay, well, why did that go wrong? Was the dog just tired? Did I make a mistake? A lot of times it's going to boil down to a handler mistake. Maybe saying the wrong command. Maybe you're giving hand signals and you pull up both of your hands and maybe your elbow flashes and the dog takes off. Whatever it is, it could be anything. But I would say definitely make the most of the time that you do have, and try to, again, it's kind of a slow process. It's like baby steps. You just take one step at a time and branch your way out. If you want to have an advanced dog, it takes that time. It takes those small steps to success. And if you do small steps to success, you're good. You're going to trip. The dog's not going to do well. Some things aren't going to always mesh. And that's a big thing, I think, to understand is bad days aren't a bad thing. You're still making progress. It doesn't mean that every day is not going to go perfect. In fact, you're going to have a lot of rough training days, or what feels rough because things didn't go as planned, and that's just part of it. And if you can manage that and you can handle through it and stay positive and stay focused, then you can absolutely get through it. But whether you're training 1 day or 6 days a week, just make the most of the time you have. Be creative. You can do a lot with a little bit of time.
I'm just thinking, with the handler's patience and the dog, just being a dog, when do you should just shut it down? Things aren't going right. Things are bad. Like before you blow up on the dog, or, or the dog's just not having a good day, and they happen. So when do you suggest to just like, all right, let's pack it in and go sit in front of the TV for a minute or whatever you want to do.
It's I guess it's probably different for every person, but I would say this, and really think about it. Dogs are incredible. They're so attentive. They can pick up small little subtleties. I mean, you have service dogs that provide incredible services to people. Diabetic alert dogs. If you think about how in tune they are with how you're feeling, then that should tell you something. So your dog's going to sense that you're frustrated before you even know it. So if the dog starts things start going a little bit south and your frustration starts to rise, you've got to either be able to manage your emotions, or if you're not able to, or something, you've had a rough, if you think about it, a lot of people train when they get home from work. And sometimes, a lot of times work isn't as great as dog training is, when you're out there just relaxing, having a good time. So if you had a terrible day, something went wrong, you're already going out there with frustration. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I would say a good time to pack it up is definitely before you blow up on the dog. It's not, we've all done it, and it never gets you anywhere. I will say dogs are very forgiving. They're so loving. If you stop there, they'll forget about it, and they'll be so happy that you're giving them some food, and they'll be ready the next time you go out. But I will say this, having that trust, you want to think about trust between you and your dog, because that is an incredible asset that you can have in your back pocket. And every time you do something that you probably shouldn't, every time you get over the top with your dog, too angry, or anything that you do that sets yourself back, it's basically, trust is like a bank. You're either depositing or you're taking out. And if you want your investment to grow, you really need to be taking the time and making sure you're putting deposits in, even if you don't feel like it. So if you feel like things are your temper's starting to go up and you feel like things are starting to go really off the rails, that's a good time to stop there before it gets out of hand. And maybe sometimes instead of just packing it up, just sit down and, again, practice hunting. A lot of times you're just sitting there in the blind. I can't tell you how many times everybody's just sitting there. You're waiting for the birds. They're not flying yet. Sit down with your dog, put your arm around it, hang out with it. Have a good time, even let your dog air out for a minute, then get it back. And if you feel like you're focused, you feel like, okay, I can do this, then get back out and do it. If you're too frustrated, go home. I promise you, it's not going to set you back. You could actually take out of that trust bank before you head home, and that's going to set you back. But if you stop in time before you pull out that deposit that you've been working so hard with on that trust, then that's a smart move. That's basically just like making a deposit. And if you do enough of that, again, that bond's going to be tight. And that's what you want. You want that tight bond. It's hard, though. I can tell you it's easy to sit here and talk about it. We've all been there. And if you don't have a dog yet and you're thinking about getting one, you're going to be there. So just hang in there and realize that's part of the process. Just take it easy. And if you feel too frustrated, like you can't focus, just go home and don't sweat it. Come back another day.
That's something that I think I could see that becoming a problem for guys who are in that camp where they get like 1 or 2 days a week to train. So they really want to get as much in as they can. And, like I always equate this stuff to like myself, right? So I'm like, if I'm shooting jump shots in my driveway, like I'm definitely going to end on a make, but like if I hit like 3 or 4 in a row, and I start heating up NBA Jam style, I mean, I'm just going to keep going, right? Then I start missing, and I'm like, well, shoot, I got to end on a make. So then I keep missing a bunch. And now all that confidence I had is gone because I got to get that one in, and I can't do it. So I'm like, man, I don't feel real good about myself. So, I mean, I could see guys with their dogs being like, hey, I get an hour on Friday nights after work to train. The session's been going great. Let's just keep going. And then all of a sudden it starts to go off the rails, and that person's just like, well, it's been so good. Let's just try to save it. Let's just try to get a little bit more. And then by that point, they might be drawing on that bank you're talking about. And it's like, man, if I'd have cut this off like 20 minutes ago, that we might have been further along, at the end of the day than where you're going to ultimately end up.
That's very true. I mean, that's the exact same thing, because I feel that very strongly. I feel like everyone can relate to that. I feel like a lot of times we define success by what it looks like instead of what's actually going on. So if you have a bad rep at the end, that doesn't mean you have a failure at all. So success isn't always defined by what you can see. It's defined by what's actually going on there when it comes to the dog. There's progress and there's advancement. Progress doesn't always mean you can visibly see advancement. Advancement is where you're visibly being able to see, like you're doing longer retrieves. You can see it happen. But sometimes progress is, hey, my dog made a mistake. No biggie. We're going to keep working through it because we make mistakes too. And again, I would say this, err on the side that if your dog's making a mistake, most of the time it's going to come back on me, the handler. That's just how it is. It's either I push the dog too quickly, push it too far beyond what I was ready for. Some other new variable was introduced. Maybe someone, if you train in public places, maybe someone had a dog in heat there. Now that would be, if you've got a male dog, a dog in heat, or even for that matter, a female dog, just that can throw them off. They could be interested in, hey, what is this all about? So there's all kinds of small variables that you might have zero idea that were there. They happened before you got there. So I always like to say, again, like you said, just take your time, be patient, and it's not about that last rep. So make sure if you've already had a successful training day and things go wrong, it's not a bad deal. Don't go home feeling sorry for yourself or feeling bad about it. Go home feeling great. Think about the good things that happened. And it's you can never go wrong if you do that.
I want to go back. We said a few times, sit there and, act like you're in a hunting situation. And I can't help but think, what is your hunting in Alabama like? You don't hear too much about duck hunting in Alabama. So, and I know myself, I have a lot of time to sit there with my dog. So, how is it down that way?
It's kind of like anywhere. If the birds are there, it's great, and if they're not, it's not so great. So, and we are kind of down here, and we're not even really in the middle of the flyway. So you kind of, but we actually do have a lot of birds. I've done some hunting, but it's hard. It's really hard here. You have to really put your work in. I mean, you got to work for it in Alabama because there's actually a lot of waterfowlers here that, or maybe they come from different states. I'm not sure, but if you get out there and if you're hunting public land and you're not there at 1 a.m., I mean, you're going to be picking third, fourth spot. So if you want to get after it, you've got to work for it and really get after it. Unless you're hunting some back slough rivers somewhere off the beaten path and you've done your due diligence in the scouting, it's it can be tough. But I will tell you, if you get on them, I mean, it's a barrel burner. You can have a great time here just like you can anywhere else. But you got to put the work in. I think that's really the case with all waterfowl hunting. You got to put the work in.
Yeah. I assume in Alabama you can kill more than 2 mallards than that's what we can kill here.
Last I looked, I think we were at 4 mallards, but I can tell you, you're probably not killing 4 unless you're on them. It's going to be wood ducks, gadwall. You can get on the mallards here and there for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Josh, can we bring up the question from Theo here? It says, how careful should we be working/hunting our pups before they're physically mature? Given that canine growth plates don't close till 18 to 20 months, is there a danger of injury or hurting a dog's future endurance in the field?
That's a really good question. I really don't like to hunt my dogs before they're a year old. That can, dogs can get hurt anytime. So anytime you're out there hunting, even if your dog's fully mature, I mean, they can get hurt. It's a rough sport. When we're out there, it can be tough. So the biggest thing is you wouldn't want to be hunting a dog well before it's ready. I mean, we're talking people do it. You can do it. You can get away with it, but you're not getting the benefit that you really could if you're going for the best dog that you can possibly have. If you're hunting that dog at 7 months old, that's a little early in my opinion. I really prefer to wait till that year plus mark. And especially, 7 months old, if you really think about it and you think about all the work that it takes to put into the training, I will tell you this. I think the reason maybe a lot of people do it is you can push a dog very quickly. You can get your dog doing really big things and very fast. You can get your dog doing blinds, hand signals, whistle stop. You could be doing that. If you really busted it, you could be doing that 8-9 months old, somewhere in there. But the truth is your dog's probably not ready to hunt at that point because like we talked about earlier, it comes down to reps, and it all boils down to how many reps you can get to have it fully ingrained. You take a young dog out there before it's ready, before you fully prepared it, guns start going off. That dog, you see its eyes get a little wide, they get a little wild, it starts breaking. That's an early habit that can be developed if you hunt too early, is breaking. And then at that point, you've got yourself a lot of work on your hands. So, but as far as safety goes, if your dog's a little over a year old, that's a great time to hunt. A lot of people I know are going to hunt it earlier. The big thing is don't push it too hard. Be patient. Now, I'm not a vet, so I can't give you, the 100% answer on that. Your better bet is to ask a vet when's my dog actually healthy enough to hunt? But if that were me, I would probably do it a little, a year plus is when I would start looking at hunting.
Is there a window, getting away from the safety side of this, is there a window in a dog's development where, maybe exposing them to gunfire before they're ready, or where something could catastrophic happen that could be very detrimental to their long-term development? Is there a window in time where that is more likely to happen? And if so, like, how long is that period where if a guy wants to be cautious and just be sure, what would you say is like that buffer that's like, after this point in time, they may have some stumbles, but it's probably not something that's going to have like a detrimental impact for the remainder of their hunting career or whatever?
Very, very good question. Really, it's hard to give you a good age window. And the reason why you can give an age window when your dog's 6, 7, 8 months old, somewhere in there, is because you just haven't had the time to put the training in that it needs to fully have everything that it needs. So the way we like to look at things at Cornerstone is everything is based on skill level. It all boils down to skill level based training. And that means, have you introduced your dog the skill sets it needs to be successful? No one wants to go to war if you haven't had training. I mean, if you're just thrown out there, it's not going to go too well. So you want to have every tool available to you. You want to have every bit of information you need to know. If you're going to go to war, you want to be prepared. Same thing for a dog. If you're going to take it out there hunting, it needs to be prepared. It needs to have every available possibility to have all the information, all the skill sets conditioned in so that it can be successful. And the reason I'm saying that is, if, let's just say, hey, I say, 8 months old, that's the window. Well, let's say somebody has an 18-month-old dog and it's had 2 weeks of training, never heard a shotgun before, and you pull out the shotgun and you start shooting. I mean, that could ruin that dog. So you never really know. And that's why I really want to tie everything back to that skill level. Have you introduced your dog and solidified the skill sets that it needs to be successful? Because that's your winning formula every time. If you want the truth, if you want the cold hard truth, if you want to know for sure my dog's got this, it's ready, then you've got to do the skill sets. Otherwise, you are risking it. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. Maybe your dog doesn't reach his full potential. Maybe you do something too early, and maybe that hinders you. It slows you down. It's really, there's very few things that are really just going to be totally detrimental and ruin your dog forever. I mean, gunfire definitely could be one, but there's a lot of things that can slow your progress, or really could really hinder you from moving forward and helping that dog to become all that can be. So as far as getting the dog to where it needs to be, skill level based, no matter what the age is. So make sure you've done the right set of skills in the right order, and you've had enough times elapsed for it to fully understand the concepts. If you do that, that's the guaranteed formula. You're not going to have problems at that point. You might run into some frustrations, but your dog will accomplish it if you provide your dog the skill sets that it needs to be successful.
Great info. I'm looking over here, and Vandekamp just made a comment, and he said, "I've been told black labs are better than yellow labs every day of the week." So what's your thought on that?
It's just a color. I mean, it's all preference, really. Whatever color you like, that's the way to go. But there's neither one's better than the other, or male or female for that matter. You definitely have some different tendencies when it comes to male and female, and heat cycle is something to consider when you have a female. But any dog that you take, even if it's not a lab, any retriever you take, and for that matter, any type of dog training you're doing, but we stick with waterfowl or retrieving. That's what we focus on. But any dog you take and you invest in and you make the most of, you can make it a great dog. So color, though, it's a personal preference. I am partial to really, I love kind of a yellow fox red type color. I just love that. Mm-hmm. But you can't beat a black lab either. And they're beautiful. You can get some stunning labs that are black.
Let me ask you, for any listeners out there that do have puppies, are you up on when to get them fixed. If they are going to get them fixed, spayed or neutered. But as far as the bone development or issues further down the line, if you do it too early, I think we've talked about it before with Barton, but just to reinforce for people.
Whatever Barton said on that, or really whatever the vet says, I never fix any of mine. So I like to leave them the way God made them, and that's the way I like to leave it. But if you're going to do it, it's a lot of great reasons too. You just do your due diligence. Make sure you're making a good decision on that. So I would not be the best one to answer that. I leave all mine intact.
Yeah. My dog was intact for a long time. Then he had something else go on. So he had to get neutered, and he's 10 years old, and I had to neuter him. I'm like, dude, this is the worst. So felt bad for the guy, but it had to go down. But, I mean, this has been probably the quickest hour I can recall on the show. Honestly, it's gone by really fast. Dan, do you have any other questions or anything that you wanted to run by? I don't want to keep Josh too long.
No,
obviously,
I'm sure we're going to have more questions after the show for people that weren't here tonight. But great interview. We appreciate your time, and we're definitely going to bring you back on. So,
yeah,
yeah, and I just want to reinforce to everybody that if you're considering your training options and you're looking at Cornerstone, some people may not realize unless they actually go to the website and check it out, or listen to some of the ads that we run on our show here. There's a free preview module there, so you can go and check it out and see the style and delivery and all that kind of stuff. So that's an awesome opportunity for people to just get a feel for what the program is going to be like, and if it's something that they feel would be a good fix or a good fit for them. So I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add on that, but we certainly appreciate you joining us, and I know it's tough being put under, putting the spotlight on you, throwing questions at you like this, but we appreciate you doing it, and I know everybody listening that had questions appreciates us as well.
Yeah, hey, I appreciate you guys, all the questions. I appreciate you asking. Really enjoyed being on tonight, and if you're thinking about doing it, get after it. You're gonna love it 100%. I know a lot of people out there might be on the fence, maybe considering even getting a dog. I can tell you. If you get into this, you might like waterfowl hunting now, but you're going to love it a whole lot more if you have a dog to go with you. You'll go a lot more too. It's a lot of fun. But thanks again, Josh and Dan. I appreciate you having me on. It's been a great time.
Likewise, we enjoyed it. That's going to do it for this week. Appreciate Josh Parvin from Cornerstone Gundog Academy joining us. Definitely check them out. And Dan, that's going to do it for us this week. Till next time, buddy.
See ya.